So we have come to the second part of our lecture on biological universe. So before we start learning further, let us recapitulate. Let us revise what we learned in our first part of our lectures. So what we did was, first we understood that yes, it is important to be slightly scared if we want to prepare ourselves against a CBR and especially a biological threat. So it is slightly to keep your fear factor slightly high. Then we understood that the predictions of getting a biological attack or a biological disaster was done somewhere in year 2005, and it happened in 2019. So that is what we understood. Then we understood that bacteria is just like a universal elimination around us, inside us, over us, everywhere we can find these microscopic life forms. Most of them are bacteria, and our body carries about 10% of its body weight in the form of the bacteria we carry. And in number, we learned that as far as their number is concerned, as compared to the number of cells inside our system, our biological cells, so there are 10 times more in number. With these bacteria, they are 10 times more in number than our biological cells. We learned that. Then we learned that there are some companies who actually claim that they have cultured good bacteria, our friendly bacteria, to make our environment around us more friendly to us, to ward away various diseases. So they come with for an amount. They will come to us and they will spray those bacteria around us. In other words, they will make our surroundings dirtier. Just jokingly, I'm saying. So they will add bacteria around us, and that will make our environment more safe. Then we learned that this biosphere is like a mesh which percolates through other spheres of our system. They are like air, atmosphere, lithosphere, where there is land and stones, is lithosphere, hydrosphere, wherever there is water. So biosphere exists in all these spheres. It exists in atmosphere, it exists in lithosphere, it exists in hydrosphere, in the form of various life forms, starting from microbial unicellular organisms to complex multicellular organisms. Then we learned that everything is in a flux. There are various cycles. Everything is in this biosphere is a cyclic phenomenon. Like there is water cycle, there is carbon dioxide cycle, there is nitrogen cycle, energy cycle, everything. This food cycle. So it is a cyclic phenomenon. The things they transform, these molecules, they transform themselves to other molecules, other states of matter. Then they come back, and then the cycle goes on. Then we learned that our planet is an ever-evolving entity. It has been evolving for billions and trillions of years, and will keep on evolving. Nobody can stop the evolution. And there is a law of natural selection, where the fittest of the biological forms will survive and others will just wither away. This is a law. There is no exception to that. Then we learned that most of the time various biological forms are helping each other. They are friendly to each other. And I give you an example, like with mitochondria, the powerhouse of the battery of our energy production of our body, which gives us energy in the form of ATP to make our various functions, body functions possible. These mitochondria, once upon a time, they were bacteria. So they infected our cells, entered inside us, and there is a symbiotic relationship. We provide them food and shelter, and in return, they give us energy, currency. And we learned that such symbiotic relation is there in nature amongst many other life forms. I give you an example of legume plants from where we get legumes and pulses, dals. The roots, there is a group of bacteria called rhizobia, so they are there in their roots, so they have got a symbiotic relationship. Then we learned that these microbial life forms were even being used to get a tactical advantage over adversaries and enemies, even before anybody knew that there are microbial life forms. There were bacteria, there were virus. Nobody knew that, but still they were used. So they were called bad air or malaria. I give you an example of malaria, mal area, so bad air. So maybe they were considered as curse. And then I gave you the examples of various biological life forms and their derivatives like toxins and venoms, which can be used as biological agents. Then I told you that there are the viruses, like viruses are neither live nor dead. Then there are fungi, singular is fungus, which is another life form which feeds on dead matter, which could lead to a lot of skin infections, and because it feeds on the dead tissue. Then there are prions, I told you, they are misfolded proteins which could lead to various degenerative diseases of the brain. They are called prions. Then there are toxins which are derived from fungal, plants and animal sources. Then there are venoms and poisons. And then I told you about some terminology which is used in biowarfare. I told you the difference between biosafety and biosecurity. There is a difference between one is unintentional and one is intentional. So do you remember which one was intentional? Which one was like a preparation against an intentional attack? Would you call it a biosafety measure or a biosecurity measure? So this you just strain your mind to get that answer. Then I told you again another thing, another word called bioterrorism, where there is an intention to harm and using a biological material. That fellow is called as bioterrorist. I told you about weaponization also. So I told you that unless a bioagent is purified, it is made in a particular size, a stabilization is done, and then a container or a instrument to disseminate it is also integrated into this, it is not called as a bioweapon. So biological agent, again I told you, biological agent is that virus, bacteria, fungus, or protozoa or their derivatives of plants or animals, these poisons and toxins. So that particular thing is a bioagent, not the person who is spreading this thing. So bioagent or biological agent, or I told you there is something called pathogen also. When they are in the natural form, disease causing microorganisms are called pathogens. I told you about biodefense is our collective efforts of a nation to prepare against this bio warfare. And I told you about zoonotic disease, that the disease which can be spread from animals to human beings is called zoonotic disease. I gave you the concept of weapon of mass destruction because biological, unless there is a toxin or venom used, usually these biological agents are weapons of mass destruction because they self-propagate in the society, they affect many. I told you about the concept of virulence. More virulent an organism, more lethal it is, more damaging it would be. I told you about the concept of incubation period, which was a window between like getting infection and getting the first symptom of the disease. So I told you that many diseases during this incubation period, when the people are apparently healthy but infected, they can infect others and create that same disease. I told you about biological toxins. What are they? And I told you about the concept of differential diagnosis. When the similar looking symptoms, various people may be having similar looking symptoms, but they may have different diseases. So all this list of diseases, we call it list of differential diagnosis. I told you about prophylactic treatment. Prophylactic treatment is given to people when they enter into an area where the prevalence of a disease is very high, or we call the disease endemic to that region. So that is a prophylactic treatment. I give you the example of various coastal areas when the malaria prevalence is high, and many people when they visit these areas, so they get chloroquine, tablet chloroquine weekly dose as prophylactic treatment to prevent against getting malaria. I told you the difference between what is a sign, what is a symptom, and I told you about the concept of culture medium. So, with this preamble, let us delve ourselves into the second part of our biological universe. As I mentioned earlier, we know biowarfare is not a warfare of modern times since microbes were discovered. Even before human beings knew about the presence of microbes, germs and viruses, bioagents were used to have tactical advantage over an enemy or targeted assassination. And who has not heard the story about wish kanyas, or they were poisonous, or poisoning themselves, I would say. So these wish kanyas, there is a mention in our ancient literature about wish kanyas. These were female assassins. They were prepared, trained, and used to kill various prominent and important people, usually kings and other courtiers. And they were reared up in a way that they were adept, they were expert in the use of various poisons and toxins, and most of them, it is presumed that most of them were plant based, or these snake venom based poisons. And not only these targeted assassinations, even biowarfare was there as warfare actually. So, in ancient words, the examples of biowarfare they can be found. Like one recorded example is there was a war between Athens and Sparta in ancient Greece. So these Athenians, what they did was they poisoned the wells of their enemies with poisonous substances, and it is presumed that they used a toxic plant, the extract or the powder of the toxic plant that was called hellebore, Helle, hell B-O-R-E, hellebore. So this plant powder they just threw into the well of their enemies to harm them or to kill them. So this is a typical example of biowarfare happening. Another example, even human corpses, the dead bodies, they were used as weapons. So in our case, we'll call them as bioweapons. In Middle Ages, the Byzantine Empire is believed to have used plague-infested corpses to infect enemy population during siege. So they will put a siege. The people who have died of plague, they will catapult these dead bodies inside the enemy territory. So this tactic was used by the Tartars using the siege of Kaffa in 14th century, and actually it resulted in spread of this Black Death throughout Europe. It is estimated that the Black Death, the plague, killed between 25 to 50 million people in Europe, drastically reducing the population and causing economic and social upheaval. Even there is a description of biowarfare in the recorded history of ancient America before Europeans went there and colonized American continent. So Aztecs and Incas, they were the native great civilizations from South America, which is they are pre-European in origin. So both these civilizations of Native American people, they are recorded as grand as any of the old worlds, and even today, people they marvel at the accomplishment of these ancient Americans, what they did. So these Aztecs and Incas they used biological agents as means of warfare as well. Aztecs, they are known to have used a type of hemorrhagic fever. Usually, they must have seen some virus causing hemorrhagic fever, and the secretions from the people who are suffering from, like Ebola. Ebola is a hemorrhagic fever. So many people who suffer from Ebola, they die. We know that. Dengue, hemorrhagic fever. Dengue, a type of dengue is also hemorrhagic fever. So people, they just bleed because of the effect of virus on our clotting system. So they just bleed from various places. So Aztecs, they were known to have used a type of hemorrhagic fever, and Incas, they are known to have used a various variety of diseases to weaken their enemies. So this is again in the recorded history. Even ancient India and China, biological warfare was used to have been used. So, in ancient India, the use of poisoned arrows and contaminated water sources was used as one of the methods of warfare. In ancient China, there are records of the use of poisonous food and poisoned well during sieges. So they will seize, they will poison their wells, they will go back. The people, when they think that enemy has gone back, they will start drinking that water and they will keep on getting extremely sick, or they will die. The Chinese also developed techniques of using toxin-containing smoke, which was used to infect the air with toxic substances to weaken the enemy. Again, so this toxin was a plant extract. So as we have discussed in the previous slides, in addition to plague-infested corpses and poisoned arrows, this tactic of contaminating the water sources to gain advantage or to kill your adversaries was one of the chief modalities of the warfare that time. So this was done by throwing dead animals. Sometimes they will throw dead animals and corpses just into the wells and rivers to contaminate the supply. Or sometimes they will use some powdered toxic substance to contaminate that thing. So main idea of this was not to kill the enemy. This was just to weaken the enemy, to make them sick and unable to fight. Now we have to make the note of this point that till very recently, biological weapon was a crude weapon. So this often resulted in the death of not only the enemy but also of the civilian population as well as the attackers themselves. The lack of understanding of how diseases spread and the lack of proper hygiene and sanitation made it easy for the disease to spread uncontrollably. So this was a double-edged sword, because nobody knew about the basics of biology and presence of microbes at that time. But is it a constraint in modern times? Think over. Is it possible now to protect oneself from a bioagent while infecting others? Indeed, we are living in dangerous times. In the 20th century, several nations developed offensive biological warfare programs, including the United States, Soviet Union, Japan, and others. These programs aim to develop and weaponize various biological agents such as anthrax, plague, and smallpox for use in biowarfare. And also in 1972, the first serious effort of the global community to curb or to stop the menace of developing bioweapons was it came in the form of Biological Weapons Convention, BWC. It was adopted. This BWC, this body, it banned the development, production, and stockpiling of biological weapons. However, concerns have been raised that some countries have, despite signing the treaty, they have continued to pursue the biological weapons research in secret. And despite the ban, allegations of biological weapons use have surfaced in various conflicts. So during Iran-Iraq war in the 1980s, both Iran and Iraq were accused of using biological weapons against each other. Iraq was later found to have used weapons containing anthrax and other toxins against Iranian troops and Kurdish civilians. Erstwhile USSR got disintegrated in 90s, and they kept their biowarfare program alive despite signing the biological weapon treaty. The anthrax leak from their own facility led to killing of their own civilian. About 70 civilians, they died because of the anthrax release from their own facility. They were developing secretly their biological weapon program, and they were using anthrax as a bioagent into that thing. That got leaked somehow, accidentally, and there was a village near that facility. Because of the air current, these anthrax, they spread to that village, and over a period of time 70 people died. So this exposed unwilling of major nations to stop their own warfare program. And politically, we can say that time, because it was USSR when it happened in 80s, so they said this was because of the fault of those villagers. Because of poor hygiene, there was anthrax in the village. It got spread and they died. Somehow we have curbed it. But after the disintegration of USSR, that part became Russia. So then Russian president actually declared to the world that yes, it was a biowarfare program and it was a leak, and because of that leak, the military program, the civilians, they died in erstwhile USSR. So this was actually admission from the Russian president itself. And do we think that all countries, they have signed such a noble treaty, the Biological Weapons Convention? Answer is no. So this is a list of these countries who have yet not signed the Biological Weapons Conventions. There are about 10 of them. Can you think about some possible reasons of them not signing the treaty? Is it that they are in favor of proliferation of biological weapons, or they think that their country will not be attacked by biological weapons? What do you think? I suggest pause this video for about 2 minutes and think over. See, some of these nations, they are so insignificant that we have not even heard the names of these nations. We don't know where even they are, and some of them are very poor. So I suggest you brainstorm on this, that why these, when there are great nations, including our own country, the great India, the Bharat, we have signed this Biological Weapon Conventions treaty, but why these 10 nations, they have not? Like how have they been able to not sign this treaty till date? So I suggest you write your responses in the course notes and brood upon the answers given by others to share with each other. In recent years, concerns have been raised about the potential for terrorist groups to acquire and use biological weapons. The threat of a bioterrorism attack using agents such as anthrax or smallpox has prompted governments and international organizations to develop response plans and increase funding for biodefense research. In addition to the offensive use of biological weapons, nations also continue to research and develop defenses against biological attacks. This includes the development of vaccines, antidotes, and diagnostic tools, field diagnostic tools, to detect and respond to a biological attack. What do you think? These efforts are sufficient? Just do some Google research. Just try to talk to each other that what else can be added to prevent future biological warfare or bioterrorism. Now, coming back to Biological and Toxin Weapon Convention. So, definitely this is a global effort of hundreds of the countries coming together on a common platform. So this BWC or BTWC is an international treaty that, as I already told you, that it bans the development, production, stockpiling, and use of biological and toxin weapons. So this treaty, those who want to know, it was adopted in 1972 and has been ratified by over 170 countries till date. And this makes it one of the most widely ratified disarmament treaties. This convention defines biological weapons as microbial or other biological agents or toxins, whatever their original method of production, of types, and in quantities that have no justification for prophylactic, protective, or other peaceful measures. So even quantity is important. How much is confiscated or diagnosed to be possessed by a particular organization, that is also important. So one has to justify why a particular bacterial or viral strain or a culture was being done at their laboratories at a particular place in that quantity. If they are not able to justify that, it is taken as one of the non-conformance against this biological and toxin weapon convention. So this definition includes not only traditional biological weapons such as anthrax and plague, but also emerging biotechnologies such as genetically modified organism and synthetic biology. To give you some further detail, this treaty also bans the use of toxins, which are defined as poisonous substances of plant, animal, microorganisms or other origin, except when intended for prophylactic, protective or other peaceful purposes. We know many of these toxins are used as even drugs and medicines. And this includes not only traditional toxins like ricin and botulinum toxin, but also new toxins such as synthetic biology-derived toxins. They are also a part of the banned substance under this treaty. And it is not only a finished biological weapon which is banned under this treaty. I just like to reiterate that it also bans research and development of such weapons and the facilities and equipment also used to procure them. Giving you further insight into BWC or BTWC. BTWC also includes provisions for transparency and confidence building measures such as declaration of relevant facilities and activities and the exchange of information on national legislation and regulations. These measures are intended to increase transparency and reduce the risk of misunderstanding and mistrust between the countries. It also includes a provision for the destruction of existing stockpile of biological and toxin weapons, as well as the facilities and equipment used to produce them. Their destruction is also facilitated by there is a provision in BTWC. This has been a actually very slow process, and while many countries have declared that they have destroyed their stocks, the treaty has not yet been able to fully achieve its goal of eliminating all biological weapons. BTWC also has a compliance and verification regime. This includes a system of annual declarations and regular meetings of the state parties, as well as the ability for any state party to request an investigation if it has a reason to believe that other state party is not in compliance with the treaty. So any of the member can raise its objection against any other member. The treaty also establishes a consultative committee which is responsible for promoting the implementation of the treaty and providing guidance on its interpretation. Despite the BTWC's wide ratification provisions for transparency, compliance and verification, there are concerns about the treaty's effectiveness, and they are genuine concerns. Some countries have, I will repeatedly say it again and again, that some countries are believed to have retained or developed biological weapon capabilities in violation of the treaty. And also there is a lack of a formal mechanism for investigating alleged violations. So there is a provision of investigation, but there is not a formal mechanism for investigating these alleged violations. So, in conclusion about biological and toxin weapon convention, we just want to summarize in a slide. It's an international treaty that bans the development, production, stockpiling, and use of biological and toxin weapons. The treaty we know has been ratified by over 170 countries, and that makes it one of the most widely ratified disarmament treaties. The treaty includes provision for transparency and confidence building measures, as well as provisions for destruction of existing stockpiles of biological and toxin weapons, and a compliance and verification regime. However, there are serious concerns about the treaty's effectiveness, as some countries are believed to have retained or developed further biological weapon capabilities despite signing this treaty in violation of the treaty. And we know the lack of formal mechanism for investigating these alleged violations, if any. So here we come to the end of the second and the final part of the lecture on biological universe. See, on the first part of the lecture, we realized the basic structure of the biodomain or biological universe or the biosphere, how these living entities or the biological entities from a small cell to the largest multicellular organism, how most of the time they are in cooperation and collaboration and helping each other to survive and they are evolving along with each other. But some of the time how they could be destructive towards each other also. In the first lecture we heard this concept, and in the second lecture our focus was how we have understood this destructive phenomenon between biological entities. See, we are biological entities. Our plants, our crops, they are biological entities. Our animals for our food, cattle, they are biological entities. So, how we have exploited our own intelligence to understand this nature and this potential of various biological beings and their derivatives like bacteria, virus, fungus, protozoa, and plant and animal toxins and poisons to harm other biological beings. So, and how at the same time we have realized that this was not good. So, internationally we collaborated. More than 170 nations they collaborated. They came together to actually stop doing this. So, I hope this you understood these concepts in these lectures. Thank you. So see you on the third lecture of this series.